For those of you who have more sheep questions, Nicole will be here afterward. For those of you who wanted to learn something about pantry keeping and rotation, this is Nicole Sauce, our next speaker, if you haven't read down the schedule. If you don't know about Nicole, she started the group Living Free in Tennessee. So even though you're in Kentucky, it still applies. Everything she's going to teach you, it crosses the border very well.
The state is where I live, not where you have to be.
Right. So you can live free wherever you are, is Nicole's message.
I was in Tennessee and it rhymed, and it was...
So, live free in Kentucky, that kind of works.
Yeah, that would work. I can move to Kentucky. Texas, I can't move there.
No. So, but Nicole has been doing this for a while and talking at many different events and festivals about many different subjects, because like many of us, she is a homesteader that does many things with different animals, their own freeze drying and pantry. I know sidebars will pop up about freeze drying in a heartbeat with any of us. Like, that's how you know you've run into a homesteader at a festival. Hey, what do you think about freeze drying? Do you package it better in Mylar or the glass jars?
Glass jars.
Glass jars, yeah. That's funny. So, anyway, that's it. So without further ado, let's let Nicole get started with her subject. So thank you very much.
All right, guys. So I have a confession to make. I hate running late. And this morning I ran late and left without my watch. So I'm just going to watch it. I'm going to run a timer so we end on time, so I respect your time. Before I jump in, Shelly actually wanted to come up and talk to you about the Great American Preparedness Tour. Who knows what that is? What is it?
Go to all three festivals, KSL, Midwest, and SRF. You get poker chips, and if you go to all three, you get an ice.
So there are three festivals who work together that we originally started calling ourselves the Three Sisters of Prepping, and then we realized that more people will eventually join, and we thought, let's do a tour. And to prove you've been somewhere, we have these poker chips that are branded based on our specific festivals. And this is the first one of the trio for the spring. Now, if any time this year you get all three of these, around November, so that in time for Christmas, we can have some fun things, you will earn this knife.
So this is a Mora knife.
Mora knife.
And it's engraved with the Great American Preparedness Tour on it, so there's going to be limited amounts of these. You too can have one of these amazing knives.
So if you think you might go to all three shows, it's a great idea to ask Shelly or Jason.
We're the only ones that you can get these from.
For your poker chip.
Find us and get a poker chip.
Yeah.
Okay?
And then if you're at Self-Reliance Festival, April 6th and 7th, you just have to see me, or we have Dawn at the information booth, or Amanda Willis. And if you're at Midwest Preparedness Project, you'll see Bobby or Data, I think, are the two who have them. And if you think you'll go to all three sometime in the next few years, I would recommend on spec, because I wouldn't be surprised if next year is a different prize for getting all three. But that is what is going on with that. It's been a pleasure working with these. But what's great about having this is we get to share ideas with each other. So we collaborate in the background as well, which is superb. You get to share relationships. And when something like marketing-wise works, we can say, hey, this is working for me, and then they can do it. And so sometimes you'll see us cross over that way. So anyway, okay. How many people here are here because your pantry right now is a colossal mess? Raise your hand. All right, so you have a pantry. How many here don't have a pantry yet? A few of you. How many people here are homesteaders? Okay, keep your hands up if your pantry's a mess. Okay, not surprised. Okay, why would you want to come here to this presentation? Just tell me why.
I have a mixture of freeze-dried, pressure canned, and hot canned.
Okay.
That's the whole room.
In several different places.
So in all the rooms in your house, you have little pods of storage of canned goods, freeze-dried, and other things. Who goes weekly shopping at the grocery store still? Yeah? Here's the thing. I think it's hard to separate prepping from pantry management, homesteading from pantry management, and if you want to be a stable human being, pantry management is the foundation from which you can thrive. Or you can end up with mountains of things all over the house driving you nuts.
that you get to throw out.
And that's okay if you're there. About a year ago, right after one of these presentations, a friend of mine came up to me. We're just going to name her Sylvia today, because I'm going to preserve her identity. And she said, "Can I see your pantry, please?" And so I took her into my pantry, and I think what she was expecting was like custom-made shelves, pantry porn pictures, all of that stuff. And instead, what she saw was that I too sometimes have a messy pantry, particularly right before having a homesteading training event right there, because my kitchen staff is going there pulling things out. But it was semi-organized. I said, "This is how I categorize, this is how I do all the things." And she said, "I'm embarrassed to say," she had I think it's a 50-foot by 20-foot attic space with shelves where she couldn't find anything. She said, "I have put all this stuff in there. It was 2020, you know, in reaction to 2020, working at a grocery store, was buying anything she could get in case they had to feed people." So she made the first error of pantry management, which is not adhering to one of my key principles: store what you use what you store. But that's okay, because we get into this why? Because we realize it's time to store some things, and especially if you're coming from the prepper standpoint, what are you told to store first?
Grains,
What?
Grains,
Rice
dry
and
goods.
beans. Who eats rice and beans? Okay. Who has stored rice and beans who doesn't really eat them?
Oh,
And when you store rice and beans in your 5-gallon buckets stacked to the ceiling, you learn a couple things. One, more than 3 buckets on top of each other cracks the bucket lids. 2, if you get rats or mice, they can eat through the plastic. And 3, you can't put anything away now that you actually use because the rice and beans are in the way, right?
Yeah, there's that.
Okay, that's okay. So she had 20 feet by 50 feet of this in a very hot attic space. And she said, I don't know what to do. Like, my kids got up there and they like grabbed all the cool snacks and they knocked stuff over on the floor. You can't even walk down the aisles. I'm so embarrassed to admit this. And I said, what you need is an intervention. So I flew to her, and we spent a glorious weekend going through her pantry and resetting it with the following principles. And I actually am going to give up on the slides at this point because, yeah. So today we're going to cover, 1, pantry principles, and I'm going to try to not say, I'm going to always try to say the R in pantry, I'll just put it that way. A power pantry plan that you can make, storage and resupply methods that work in families where multiple people access the pantry. Anybody have that issue? Yeah, so you're like, oh, we're out of toilet paper because nobody told me right? Yeah, okay. Then we're gonna talk about a way to get a quick start idea of what you should have in your pantry. And then I'm gonna talk a little, well, if we can get the slides working, I will show you what I call pantry porn, which is beautiful pictures of what people do for storage solutions. But we can talk through storage solution ideas if the pictures don't work. Because even if you have an 8,000 square foot home with a dedicated space to be your prepper pantry, you still want to approach your pantry from the standpoint of tiny home houses. You will be way happier if you do it that way. Otherwise, you will end up with something under your bed, something up above your wood stove, something in the laundry room, something, you know what I'm saying? It's like I'm personally calling you out, right? Yeah. Ask me how I know is something we like to say around here a lot. So the pantry principles start as follows. 1, your pantry is a savings account. I was listening to a podcast on the way here about a man whose wife decided to leave him after his 2nd back surgery when he was laid up, and then he lost his job. And what followed after that was, lawyers, custody. It was terrible. He said, I felt like Job, okay? And he said, some days the only thing that got me through was listening to empowering podcasts and just putting one foot in front of the other when he could walk. He said the other thing that got me through was that I had been storing food that I eat for years. And when money was tight, I had a food savings account. So to the perspective change there is to think of everything that you are storing as a savings account rather than a hedge against crisis. Because when you're planning your pantry, in case the zombies come, you will store a very different thing than if you're planning your pantry against needing to have a food savings account for the future in case you have a few months where you just can't buy food, or you shouldn't buy food. You can't buy food without, going credit card, right? And from a homesteader perspective, it translates really well to how you plan what you do on your homestead. So think of your homestead as your pantry, right? That's also a food savings account for you. It's a fuel savings account. Okay, so that's the first thing. Second principle, wish I could remember that, right? I have to actually look at my notes. Make sure you have a system that works for you. Everybody's system will work different. Who here loves spreadsheets? You guys will hate my pantry resupply method. But that's okay. You're probably capable of having a spreadsheet with your inventory on your computer that you update on the regular, right? Yeah?
Not on the regular, yeah.
And QR codes that you swipe on the shelves? I have been accused of having ADHD, and that is probably true. I will never be tested because why? What I know is I'm really good at hyper-focusing on something, and I get a lot done when I do that. And then there's the other times that we call scatter mode. Scatter mode is awesome. Scatter mode is why when I had to get started milk feeding that lamb this week and did not have a kit, I had milk feeding supplies in the kitchen, the living room, and the dining room at my house. It looked like a milk explosion, really. And then I made it into a bin and it got taken care of. But I needed to do the scatter mode to learn how to do the thing, right? This can happen in your pantry too. So the system I've developed for resupply works for me, it works for my household, and I will share it with you, but I will also say I have seen other people with different systems, and when you think about your pantry, think about the reality of how people work in your household, what they are willing to do to help you stay on track, and who's in charge. And you can kind of take it from two ways. Everybody's involved, and then they all agree, and you do the system, or you become the pantry Nazi, and nobody can move stuff out of the long-term storage except for you. And as long as everybody knows what's going on, either one can work. And if you are a spreadsheet maven, I wish you would move to the holler and do my inventory, but yeah, okay. All of it works. It has to work for your budget, your lifestyle, your family. I like to think of the pantry from a permaculture standpoint, so I call it the perma pantry. And that means that you want to store way more of what you use than what you think you might need. And I divide it in zones. I actually took the permaculture zones and put them on a list. And zone 1 is stuff we use every day. So make a list of stuff you use every day. Those are the most important things to think about. How am I keeping it in my pantry? And it may be that you're keeping it in your pantry by storing it, like if it's a dried thing like wheat, if you eat wheat. Or it may be something that you decide stores better long-term alive. An example of something I like to store alive is lettuce. So storing lettuce for 6 months freeze-dried, she goes, yeah, no. Or dried, or it'll just turn into sludge in your fridge. Like, you're not gonna do that. But it's very easy to grow lettuce. It grows very quickly. You can have a whole, decent sized head of lettuce in 4 to 6 weeks, especially if you tap into aquaponics or hydroponics, and you can set a system where you check on it once a day. And you'll see I'm big on systems. It's because I'm super busy as a homesteader, right? And so for me, growing sprouts takes 30 seconds a day. And I had to figure out where, and the key to success for me, who drinks coffee here? I drink coffee too. They're laughing because I'm a coffee roaster. So I Hollow Roast Coffee, I fulfill orders at Hollow Roast Coffee. And so I always have great coffee, and I have a cup of coffee every morning, and the thing I will forget most easily every day with my sprouts is to rinse them and put them back into a dark place. So my kitchen is organized with coffee cup, sprouts. And then when I open the cabinet for my coffee cup, I'm like, oh yeah. And while the coffee is brewing, I'm doing it. Once I start that, when I'm growing lettuce, because I grow it seasonally. In the height of summer, I don't grow lettuce because there's so much coming off the garden. When I'm growing it seasonally, it's like, okay, I do the sprouts, I do the lettuce, I put the dishes away from the dishwasher, and then I have my coffee in peace. So that's the idea of the permapasture, like more of what you need versus what you don't want. So I'll go through the zones that I've come up with very quickly. 1, daily. 2, weekly. 3, monthly. 4, yearly. 5. This is a category that until you've managed the other 4 zones, you should not even think about. And this is one where our prepper friends tell us to think about it, and we call that refugee rations. This is the stuff you're storing to feed the other people if you need to feed the other people, or to help the other people, which is a noble thing to undertake right after you've mastered those first 4 for yourself, okay? And then everything that can be streamlined needs to be streamlined. And the biggest thing that has helped me with my pantry to make it so it's not piles of stuff everywhere where there's spaghetti sauce here and spaghetti sauce there is plan in extra space in your storage. So you see pictures of pantries and everything's like right there by category and it's tight, right? But at any given time, especially if you are living seasonally, right? You will either have 24 jars of tomato sauce or 2 jars of tomato sauce. But you always need room for 24 jars if you store 24 jars. And the key to success in just increasing your success rate with tidiness is to keep that empty space for yourself. We have the same thing at my house with freezers because we are primarily meat eaters. So we have multiple freezers because storing meat frozen is the best flavor. At certain times of year we have less meat, and at other times of year, like in the winter, we end up with more meat. So we will consolidate freezers and unplug one. It's the same principle. We're still keeping that space. The temptation is to find other things to put in that freezer, and then when you go to process your next cow, and you need the cow freezer, you're buying a freezer, or you're like panicking using it up, and you're probably falling into bad habits of storing things you aren't eating, right? Which we absolutely do not want to do. Now's a really good time to ask you this question. Do you have a phone? A phone on you right now. Okay, I had slides prepared for today, and I put some resources together for you. So take out your phone and send yourself a text message, or send your buddy a text message, and all you have to write is NicoleSauce.com, NicoleSauce.com. NicoleSauce.com. That will remind you when you get done with this, so you don't remember it in your head, to go look. I have a pantry cheat sheet up there for you. I have a list of websites and resources that I use for food storage and other things, and other resources for you up there. I also do have a webinar I've done, and this outline is adapted from that. It's a 4.5-hour Power Pantry webinar, usually $95. There's a coupon code on that page that'll get it for you for $25, and it comes with a booklet, a plan print to fill out. Okay, all we got was Nicole's sauce, like spaghetti sauce. Awesome sauce. Awesome sauce, that's what Jack calls me. Okay. And then, if you ever have the voice of fear coming in, because you write your list of things you eat every day, and you discover on that list is something like coffee, chocolate, or bananas. And you're like, man, I can't grow that, and I can't store that very well. Don't worry about that stuff. If it doesn't store, like coffee doesn't store well unless it's unroasted. Ask me how. I know a lot about coffee. And are you going to grow coffee in Kentucky? If we have such a catastrophic thing happen that we can't ship in coffee, I'm pretty sure coffee is gonna be the least of your worries. If you have a little bit stored for long-term that doesn't taste great, also ultimately, like premium tasting coffee will also be the least of your worries. And usually when you have that list of things you quote unquote can't get, it's stuff like that. And if you have something on that list that's really important, like insulin, you've probably already thought about what to do about insulin, right? So just don't nerd out too much on the zones and that sort of thing. So, now we move on to your why. Why are you storing food? What?
So many reasons.
So many reasons. One,
We lose our job.
if you lose your job. What else? Why are you storing food?
Natural disasters.
Natural disasters. Tell me more about that.
Just about anything can control shipping of food coming in, production of food.
So natural disasters will shut off the just-in-time fulfillment practices of the grocery store. So everybody who raised their hand and said, I still get my stuff at the grocery store weekly, a really good first step is to define your why. Why do I want to have a pantry? Why do I want a food savings account? And if it's because you feel a little insecure because you saw what happened in 2020 and 2021 when a relatively minor glitch in the shipping system took like 18 months to work out, that's a good reason to be motivated to do that. Yes?
My why was because the government could close businesses.
Because the government can close businesses. Did anybody else secretly cheer when businesses were like, no?
Yes.
No. You actually had in Kentucky, I can't remember his name, a coffee shop guy who
He's in Williamstown, Kentucky.
Yeah.
His name B.
Yeah.
Bat over there.
There's a bat.
It's a vampire bat.
If anybody didn't think I was a vampire before, you now know the truth.
He's just hanging out now.
It's okay. He'll be okay. He's just confused.
Yeah.
Or she.
There's a lot of children who come look to that window there.
Yeah, it's one of yeah, that might be.
So why a pantry planner is very helpful, whether you use the one I've put together or you make your own. What you want to do is start with your why and really drill down.
Yeah.
Like list all the whys. It could be food savings account. It could be because I'm on a homestead and frankly running out to get vinegar in the middle of summer to do pickling is a pain in the neck and often they're out of the one I need. It could be food shortages, natural disaster, job disaster. It could just be because you want to build towards your food storage for religious reasons. There's all sorts of reasons. The easy solution to the 1 year of storage is to go buy freeze-dried stuff, right? Who eats that stuff?
I actually do.
Yes. Number 10 can of powdered butter. What do you do with it?
All right, now it's sitting on the shelf.
Right now it's sitting on the shelf. And that's okay. I have one, actually. I'm going to pop that puppy open and just taste it because I'm curious.
Oh, well,
right?
we did that with some red feather just the other day, about 3 weeks ago or a month ago.
But when you write down your why, you'll have multiple whys. And if you have somebody who's supportive of you and your family willing to do this with you, it's better to involve them and say, these are all the reasons I want the pantry. Why do you want this pantry to be more organized and serve us better? And how do we want it to serve us? You get all those whys out and you choose your top 3 together. If you're alone, you choose your own top 3. And then from there, you whittle it down and you order them. Because when you know why you're building your pantry, you know what to do next. And if your why is the food savings account so that you can go longer without having to resupply, so that if there are shutdowns and you can't get toilet paper, you're like, yeah, but I have 6 months of toilet paper, so I don't even need to think about like installing the bidet for another 6 months, right? That's a way more secure place to be. And then when you go out and everybody's freaking out because we saw them freak out, right? Some of us may have freaked out, and that's okay. That was an external message to you about what you can do in the future to be more secure, right? That's okay, fear works. But let's not make decisions in fear and have, 50,000 pounds of something you don't eat. The next thing you want to do is then set goals for yourself. So when you have your why, you know what your vision is. If you have a shared why with your spouse and family, that's even better. And then you can say, okay, in order to reach this why, a few things need to change at my house. One, I do need to have somewhere to put this stuff. And that's usually a problem in because most homes are not built with a pantry, right? So then you can walk around and look at how other people organize their pantries and come up with great ideas. Some great ideas I've seen are a long hallway that goes to multiple bedrooms where one side's just a wall. One mason jar thick shelves with a little ledge so if you have an earthquake it doesn't fall. And you can line floor to ceiling all sorts of stuff. You can store dry goods in mason jars, you can put your canned goods in mason jars. You can
Where do we take you?
oh, you got the bat.
Somewhere dark.
Mr. Bat. I'm like, it's like when you're a substitute teacher for the first time and like somebody behind you builds a tower all the way to the ceiling with tape and you don't see it. That's what just happened to me. Okay. So once you have your goals, then you make your supply journal. And the supply journal, I started thinking about this because of the survival podcast when Jack was saying how to do copy canning. Who knows what copy canning is? Yeah, just a few people. So I'll explain it. You do a journal of what, every time you use something, you just have a book like this in your kitchen, and every time you do something, if you use spaghetti sauce, you write spaghetti sauce. If you eat a Snickers bar, you write down the Snickers bar, and then the next day if you take another Snickers bar, you just write little hashtags next to it. So you can see by the end of the month how much you've used of what. This is not a time to lie about what you're eating. But something that will happen that month is you will suddenly find yourself eating slightly healthier because you will become aware of how many times you run to the fridge for that, string cheese or whatever. And two, at the end of the month, you'll have a list of things. Some of those things you then analyze and say, okay, this stores well. Spaghetti sauce in a jar stores well, right? Pasta stores okay, but it stores well. It doesn't store as okay as spaghetti sauce in a jar. We have a gremlin.
Bat.
Cheese, does that store well?
Freeze drill.
It depends, right? I've learned some tricks with cheese. The things that store well for copy canning, if you're going weekly grocery shopping or monthly grocery shopping and buying things at the grocery store, when you go to buy 1 jar of spaghetti sauce that week, you buy 2 jars.
That's what I copied.
And that's copy canning. So that costs you another $3 to $5 that week. And you do that every week until you have enough for 2 weeks of food storage, and then you move on to the next thing. Now, right now you're thinking, but Nicole, that's slow. Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Are you saying coffee as in coffee?
Copy, like photocopy machine.
That makes so much more sense.
Yeah. Nicole, that's too slow. What do I do? Well, if you want to kickstart this and you have a budget of $500 to get started with the things you use, once you have that month's worth of food, you can figure out what things cost and choose, like, if I have $100 extra this week, where do I put it? When you do that, you avoid sinking hundreds and hundreds of dollars into things that somebody else told you you should have in your pantry. And you've just sunk $100 into things your family eats.
How about if you see special sales?
Oh, you're an advanced pantry person, aren't you? The next thing that happens when you start doing copy canning is you realize very quickly what a year's supply of spaghetti sauce looks like for your family. And then you see spaghetti sauce on sale for $1 a jar, and you're like, I can knock that out right now and get it done. You'll start seeing deals, and you'll start jumping in on those deals. At my place, we think about things by the year now. But I started just like everybody else, thinking about them by the week, then the 2 weeks, then the 2 months, and eventually I figured out what annually we need. And then we've had to go through a major dietary change where I used to bake all the homemade bread and all of that, and we're keto now. We don't have any carbs. So I had to do the pantry reset that many of you know you need to do. Who needs to do a pantry reset? Okay, look around. Do any of you know each other? Seriously. Hands up, pantry reset. Any of you know each other? Sort of? You know what works really well for a pantry reset is to have a friend over help you. That's why I say that. And then you go to their house. It's like you work share. Yes, sir.
Another one that kind of goes along with sale is when your garden is producing, it's gonna be an overabundance. Figure out what you're gonna do to store it.
Right, so we're gonna move to food storage. It's a perfect segue. When your garden is overproducing, now you have a problem because there's only so many people you can give zucchini to, right? There are never too many zucchini at my house because I have a freeze dryer. And I'm a ketogenic eater, so actually zucchini flour is how you thicken stew. It's one of two ways. Freeze-dried mushrooms do a great job too. And you can thicken the stew without flour. It does add carbs, but it's not a grain. So when I say ketovore is more how I describe myself, I do eat some carbs, but I don't eat grain because it makes my joints hurt, just to overshare. Okay, so storage, how things store, it's a timeline, right? So the shortage storage you have is your kitchen counter. And, you know, there are things that can store for a long time. They're like eggs. But, you know, if you throw a head of lettuce on your kitchen counter, it's going to store for a few days before it starts to wilt, right? So then what do we figure out? We can put it in the fridge. And then a head of lettuce that's fresh can actually go 2 weeks if you store it right in your fridge in like a sealed container that has a little bit of humidity in it, but not too much. And if it's not sitting in the puddle of water, right? That's how you store a head of lettuce. If it's not as fresh, it won't store as long. Most heads of lettuce last 3 days to a week from the grocery store. But another way to extend the life is to ferment a thing. So if you want to store milk for a long time and you're not going to can it, you can ferment it and have yogurt. Basically, you can turn it into cheese, and cheese lasts way longer in the refrigerator than milk if it's not pasteurized. You can pasteurize it. You can ultra pasteurize it, which is how you get those things that are like 2 months from now it goes bad, right? But fermenting is a great way to store stuff. So if you have an overabundance of cabbage, what are you going to do? Make sauerkraut. It lasts a long, long time, especially if you didn't take the sauerkraut and put it in your refrigerator and cool it down. So you can stack these methods. Curing, like curing meats, is how we keep the bacon lasting longer. The dry salamis. Has anybody heard of Bosturma? Bosturma is a cured lean beef that basically just uses salt and thyme to cure it, and it is delicious. But that's how you can extend things. Smoke helps as well. Canning. How long do canned goods last that you've home canned?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of debate on this. I like to use mine up in 2 years, but they can safely last longer. What happens is their color and their texture degrades over time if they're canned properly.
Depends on how it's stored too.
And if you store it in a cool, dark place, that's true. If you put it on your sunny window, that's a really bad idea for 2 reasons. One, when liquid heats up, it expands and you can pop that lid off and now it's no longer canned. And it could have safety issues. It could grow things that you don't want to eat. And 2, the color will degrade if the sun's hitting it very quickly. So always think about in fact, pretty much all food stores better in the dark if you can do it. Things that are less sensitive to being stored in the dark would be a Mylar bag with freeze-dried food in it, because the Mylar bag is keeping the sun from hitting the food, right? And cool always helps. So you can store things like dried wheat in your outdoor storage building, and it can freeze and it can get warm in that storage building, and the wheat will do better in that than, say, something like a ball of cheese or your canned goods. If your canned goods freeze, you just lost a lot of work, because what happens when your canned goods freeze?
Boom.
Yeah, the noise is like, boop. Yeah, not only that, you lost your mason jars, right? So proper food storage is all about cutting the light out, keeping the temperature down if you can, and if you don't have power, how do you do that? How did they do that years ago?
Root cell.
Under the house. What's the challenge under the house? If you're gonna be like, I'm gonna cowboy it and pull up that thing and get under there and put my canned goods. What's the problem? Moisture. So if you're gonna go down below your home, think about what the humidity level is like and what you can do to help keep things there longer. And what things wouldn't you want to put down there at that point? I don't want to put any of my grains down there. I'm keeping the grains actually up, probably. If there's a chance that of course I'm putting them in something that seals out the moisture, but if there's ever a problem, man, at least with canned goods, you got them in the jar. And keep your lids, your screw lids off of your canned goods, especially in a moist, humid environment, because it will rust where the lid touches the ring, right? And then if the rust gets bad enough, it will break your seal. But the cool thing about going down below your house is that you've just opened up a whole new world for yourself. As long as you can keep the rodents out. What's that world? It's cold storage for root cellar items like onions, potatoes, apples, garlic. All of these things, I have kept garlic from fall till the very next fall without it sprouting in a root cellar. My root cellar is not a proper root cellar. It's halfway underground, and it's got cinder blocks, so it's not the soil. It's not bare soil. I've kept potatoes from October into March, and then they start putting out eyes, and then I put them in the ground again. I have kept butternut squash for a whole year, and they're still good. I keep onions from October to about March. So that, you know what that does for me?
Not going to the store.
I'm not going to the store, A. I still have onions, B. And do you know what a 55 to 100 pound bag of onions cost? Less than $1 a pound is what you can just sort them. Or if you're a really good onion grower, which I am not, you can grow, you know how many to grow. We go through 110 pounds of onions from October to the end of April every year.
Wow.
And the reason I know that is I stored 55 pounds and it wasn't enough. And I was like, surely 55 pounds will work. And that's what you gotta do. You gotta get out there and try, right? Okay, so right now you guys look glassy-eyed, and we're gonna play a game. Truth or myth? Who wants to play truth or myth? All right, we got hands up. Okay. Meat cannot be refrozen. Truth or myth? Who's truth? There's one truth. Who's myth? Myth. Do you know why they say that? Because when you defrost meat improperly, you can grow bacteria, and if you improperly defrost it and it gets above like 42 degrees, you start growing things, and then you refreeze it, and then you don't know. And they have to give us recommendations that are super safe. So if power goes out and your meat was in a well-packed freezer and it defrosted in a 32-degree environment, which is what your freezer is at that point, especially if you wrap it in blankets when you realize that, and then you refreeze it, it hasn't gotten above 42 degrees, has it? The second thing is commercially produced meat has been frozen and refrozen multiple times before you get it fresh at the store in most cases. So you also don't know how many times it's been defrosted there. So don't throw away your meat just because it got up to defrosted in your freezer. But if it's gotten above 42 degrees and you don't know how long, that's when you start making decisions. You decide if you're comfortable with the sniff test or not, right? Okay, truth or myth? Commercially canned foods store well in a shed.
Oh, in a shed?
In a shed. Truth or myth? Truth?
They do store well or don't?
Do. We got myth on that one. They will store okay in a shed, but if it's a shed that gets very hot, they degrade more quickly, just like anything else. And if it freezes, what happens to canned goods?
Yep.
Right? Okay, truth or myth? Tomatoes go in the fridge. Myth. Who says truth? Who says myth? Tomatoes, for me, store better on the counter. But you can slow it down in the fridge sometimes. And if anybody else is a homesteader, you know what tomato season's right? Like you start getting that rotty smell in your house all the time. And what I do with tomatoes in that situation is I core them and I slice them and I throw them in the freezer. unless I'm gonna do stewed tomatoes, and then I ignore them until December when it's cold in my house, and then I can them from the freezer because then they're heating my house, because I wanna function stack that, right? Yeah, and they don't have to be canned right away, so. Okay, one more truth or myth. Dry, dehydrated food never goes bad.
It's a myth.
Who says truth? Nobody, everyone's like, nothing's the truth anymore, Nicole. The interesting thing about dehydrated, and I'm not talking freeze-dried food, I'm talking normal dehydrated food. Any moisture that's in there is your recipe for it starting to go bad over time. They do store longer, especially if you put them in a bag with an O2 absorber, right? Or a desiccant of some sort. But they go bad over time, and if you have something that you really want to last for a long time, you can dry it and then put it in your freezer, and it will take up less space. So with jerky at my house, it can store at room temperature. I throw it in the freezer if I don't think we're gonna eat it quickly, so that just a little bit comes out of the freezer so that I extend its life. Because every one of these tools is life extension. But I know the real reason you came here, right? It was to figure out how I get my family to align on the resupply problem. Am I right? You gotta have a system, man. So we have a system that I made, and I had to get people to buy into it. And it usually works, except for once in a while when Tactical is being flighty in his head. And that is this: for my pantry, the change I made that empowered me the most, after I figured out how to document, and let me tell you, I do have canned goods in a shelf above my back wall. I have canned goods in a dedicated canned good area. I have other storage in what I call the prepper pantry, and I even sometimes put things in these boxes under my bed. So yes, I do have a pantry in multiple locations. What I did was I dedicated those locations to what goes there. That was the first. So it's not a rotating set of things go in the thing under the bed, right? This is always gonna be the honey, because we don't eat honey very much at my house, and so it, it can go the place that's the most inconvenient for me to go get it. The canned goods, on the other hand, are the things we use the most. The canned goods and the frozen stuff. So those are the easiest to get to. So when we decided what went where, we thought, okay, it has to have these characteristics. Like a freezer has to have power to plug in. Canned goods can't freeze, but I do have wheat berries still. Those can freeze. Doesn't matter if those get cold. You guys are freezing in the front row, aren't you? Yes, like he's over there. Okay. And all of those places are what I refer to as long-term storage. So to me, that's my grocery store. The grocery store is not the grocery store. The grocery store is my resupply location. The long-term storage is my grocery store. So if I go shopping weekly, where do I go? I go out to long-term storage and I say, what are we eating this week? And I pull things in. In my kitchen, I have cabinets with food and spices and all the things we have in our kitchen. That's short-term storage. So one container of pepper is in short-term storage, and when I know that I need 2 a year, the second one's in long-term storage. So as I'm using things and I go, darned if I'm not out of pepper in here. I walk out to long-term storage, and I have them stacked with the oldest in the front, and I write with a Sharpie on everything because I'm not organized like she is with spreadsheets, so I don't have the QR code thing going. I just write the month I bought it, the year, I have it in front. I do that so I can visually double check myself in case somebody caused chaos in my life. I grab the one that's oldest, I walk back into my kitchen, and in my kitchen is a dry erase board. And on the dry erase board, I write 1 pepper. So the agreement in my house is if you pull anything out of long-term storage, unless it's a home canned good, which is a different system, you write it down. So anything I would have to resupply. The home canned goods, I have dedicated spots for how much we need each year. And I can just go look, and I'm okay with the go look. And getting Tactical to write down green beans wasn't gonna happen. So we had to find that system. That simple system has kept me from having pods of dishwasher detergent or smoked oysters or whatever else I love smoked oysters, and they just come in cans. I don't make them myself. All of those things. That's what's kept me from having, like 3 in a row here. Couldn't find it, forgot it, didn't know if I had it, was at the store, bought the thing. And, I call it the mustard syndrome, where you go in your fridge and there are 8 open bottles of mustard because men can't see fridge stuff. It's biological, guys. I don't blame you. I know that, women are biologically programmed to see some of the details close, and men see further away.
It's called man eyes.
Yes, it is man eyes, and I've learned to love that. I've also learned that if you want a man to find something in the fridge, you put it in the center at eye level. So if you want him to eat a certain leftover, it's not manipulation, it's just organization, right? Anyway, that's the method we use that doesn't require the spreadsheet, but I will say whenever we do the freezers, we keep a document on the freezers of how many of this kind of steak or that. And then meal planning from there. So once you get things in order, once you get things in order, here's how meal planning works. You go to your long-term storage and you say, self, that cow's tongue's been in this freezer for a long time, self, and I haven't cooked it. You know why I haven't cooked it? Because I don't know how to cook cow's tongue. So I guess this is the week I learned. Or I don't like cow's tongue, so why am I storing that? I'm going to give it to somebody who likes cow's tongue. Whatever. You will always have that set of things you like more, and you should always, as much as possible, eat what you like more, because then every day you're eating what you want most. But every so often you're like, it is time to use up the pork chops. I choose 3 things a week for 3 meals that I know we kind of need to use up, that we've been putting off. It's not usually because we don't like it, it's because we don't like it as well as we like other things. And I build them into the week. So it'll be Sunday's the day I do it. Sunday I'll say, okay, I'm taking these out, and one of them's a chicken, because those who listen to my podcast know that I don't like how chicken tastes anymore. So I have to hide it behind curries and lots of spices and all sorts of stuff. So I'll take a chicken out, because it's not my favorite, and then I'll take 2 other things to work in. And that's how we keep up on it and don't waste. Because the best part about having a well-functioning pantry is that you use what you store and you store what you use. And I think I've left time for questions, so.
On long-term storage of condiments that are dry, such as pepper kernels,
Okay.
rice, few things like that.
Yeah.
I frequently will freeze dry them, to get them perfectly dry, and then put them in a bottle, canning jar, and draw a vacuum.
Yeah.
And to me, that will make it last basically forever, because moisture, in my estimation, is your worst enemy.
Moisture, heat, light. Yeah. So what he was saying is he freeze dries things like peppercorn and then vacuum seals them in a jar for longer term storage. Some things still lose flavor over time. So like coffee, if you do that with coffee that's roasted, it will last way longer than in the bag on your shelf. But over time, it just loses flavor. I think experimentation helps you with that. That's also an advanced pantry skill. Like the first thing I think everybody should do with their pantry is figure out what they use, figure out what on that list is storable, and then build those things up and build your system of rotating it through. Just do that. Don't worry about all the other stuff. And then the second thing is think about our furry friends that can get in there and really mess us up, or our winged friends, our pantry moths, your rodents, all of those things. Anywhere you store food, the best way to deal with pests is never to have them. So to the best of your ability, exclusion is important, because it is amazing what a rodent can get into. I like mason jars because they can't get into it, but I certainly am not thrilled to see a mason jar that has rat poop on it. And that's the next thing. And if a mouse pees on a jar enough, it will rust the lid and you'll have the same thing. So if you see signs of rodents, deal with them. You can use, traps, cats, whatever it is. But then think about how are they getting in here? And what can I do about that? And that's where the root cellar can be a challenge, because I don't know how you close mice out of a root cellar.
I'll get you a tip on when you're choosing a container. process, when they make buckets and stuff,
Yeah.
they actually use vegetable oil in making the plastics. Some do, some don't. So if you don't want rats and stuff, find out the company you're buying them from and see if they're using vegetable oil in the process, because they'll chew right through that, because
Yeah.
you can sense that
They can
vegetable oil. If they don't use it, that's gonna be a way better container for you.
Yeah, to the extent, this is great. So what he was saying, for anybody who didn't hear in the back, is some plastic containers, they use vegetable oil in the manufacturing process. Find out who does not use that plastic, and here's why. They're going by smell to figure out where the food is. So the extent that they don't smell that you have the food stored, whether it's by being attracted to the plastic or by making sure your mason jars are very clean, you may have a drive-by turd while somebody was looking for something, but you're not gonna have an all-out squirrel assault. The other thing is, if you have an area with openings from the outside, I have found that, so anybody do trapping? Do you ever use fox urine to attract fox to a trap? Have you ever tried that? You know who doesn't like fox urine? Squirrels and rodents. And so if you have an area where you're like, I can't quite figure out how to close them out, you can basically get bottles of the urine and put it outside, and then if it rains too much, you need to reapply it. But that's been super helpful for me. That's one I learned this year because I have a long squirrel story that if anybody wants to talk to me afterwards, I can tell you all about the squirrels. And what they were willing, they will eat through wood, they will eat through vinyl, they will eat through, they will get up under metal siding and eat through wood. Like once they think they want in, then it's on. So, yeah, a metal trash can, it actually makes a pretty good storage from a rodent standpoint, but moths can get up in there, so if you're putting stuff in a trash can, you want it pantry moth proof. And then they do make pantry moth traps that work pretty well if you end up, like once you get pantry moths, you're like cleaning everything out, wiping everything down with essential oils, and then I will put the traps up for that. And then you need to do that on about a monthly cycle until they're gone. Pantry moths are no fun once they get in. Yeah, there's a big old, yeah, it's not as bad as lice, but it sure feels like it sometimes. Any other questions about pantry stuff? Or food storage in general? Well, we have gone
Nicole?
about
Nicole?
51 minutes, yes.
One comment, you were mentioning about butter.
Yeah,
One of the things that we do is we make a lot of ghee, and ghee lasts for a long time.
Yeah.
It has a very high flash point.